Welcome to our Devos this week at the Log Church, where we have been exploring the topic of how to forgive anyone. And I know that there are some of you that are listening to this, and you are bitter, you're hurt, you have been wronged by somebody, and legitimate. It's not something made up, it's not a conspiracy in your mind. Like there's somebody that's hurt you, somebody's come into your life, maybe hurt somebody in your family, and you have a valid injury to your life. We have been exploring how do you forgive anyone. And I believe as Christians, and the scriptures essentially allude to this, that we ought to be the most forgiving people on the planet. We ought to be marked as forgiving people for so many reasons. You have to get your mind first focused on how much God has forgiven you. That was the first day we talked about that. You have to focus on God's forgiveness of you first. That's the only way you can begin the process of forgiveness. And by the way, as a side note, just so you understand, forgiveness is a process. You can make a one-time decision to forgive someone, but sometimes that forgiveness doesn't appear and get there in your heart right away. You can make a decision and go, look, I'm choosing to forgive this person. I'm choosing to look past their sin. But the next day you see them, they're doing the same thing, they've hurt someone, blah, blah, blah. That stuff rises up at you. You have to choose again. A lot of people, what they'll say is, well, I don't forgive them because I still feel upset. Forgiveness is a process. There's a great video, and you could Google it, Rachel Scott. And the name of the father escapes me, but it's Rachel Scott's father. And he was a believer. And if you don't know, Rachel Scott was one of the young ladies that was murdered at the Columbine High School shooting. That was years ago now. It's a horrible part of our history, and it's just a terrible story. She was one of the ones that was essentially killed because of her outward faith, and they kind of singled her out and they wanted her to deny God. Rachel Scott had that testimony. And so her family had this legacy of faith. Well, if you listen, if you're right now, I want to encourage you, if you right now are struggling with like unforgiveness and bitterness, and you don't know how to get past it, and it's eating away at you, I want to encourage you to look at Rachel Scott's father and how he speaks about the young men that murdered his daughter and how he prayed that he could forgive them. I mean, it's unbelievable. But that's kind of what I'm talking about, forgiveness being a process. That was a side note. So just because you don't feel like you want to forgive that person or feel like it doesn't mean that you haven't made the choice and that you're trying to honor God by forgiving. Now, let's get to the subject of the day. How do you forgive anyone? Aside from focusing, of course, on how much God has forgiven you, you don't meditate on their sin. Okay? Don't meditate on their sin. Many, many times when we are hurt, it's so easy to start on a record player and we have a broken record that keeps repeating in our minds the offense of what this person has done to us. And it is horribly, horribly toxic to our thinking. We rehearse the lines of the confrontation, we remember the situation, and then what happens when we talk to people about it, it's as if it just happened yesterday. There are people that I've dealt with in counseling over the years. And here's how I know someone is bitter. They'll bring you into a discussion or a situation that happened 10, 15 years ago. And the way they talk about it is if it happened only yesterday. I mean, it's just as fresh. They remember what the air smelled like. They remember exactly the words used. They even remember what happened like the day or two before and the day or two after. They're so stopped on that moment that they can't get their mind past it. And what that proves to me is, for years, they have been meditating over and over and over again on the sin of the person that hurt them, the person that they need to forgive. This is horrible. It's tragic. And I mean, the sin might have happened, yes. That infidelity in your marriage, that might have happened, yes. You might have had somebody in one of your parents or maybe one of your siblings, and they hurt you. They'd said something that injured you, and that might be valid, yes. But you have, listen to me closely, really closely, you have an option as to whether or not you're going to meditate on that sin. You don't have to think about it all day. You don't have to think about it every day. You don't have to think about it every week. You can choose how much of that takes up your headspace. And I'm going to encourage you that unless it's something that you're working through and trying to deal with, I want you to try to limit as much real estate that it takes in your head as possible. Look with me in Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. Hear the Apostle Paul's words and see how we go wrong when we constantly meditate on those that have sinned against us. He says, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. He doesn't say think about your injury. He doesn't say think about the sin. This is a fireproof plan on how to have positive outlooks on what's going on in your life. So when we're constantly replaying an injury that's occurred in our past, we are just keeping that wound open to fester. And what's worse is we are feeding a root of bitterness that we're going to talk about in the coming days here that will eventually poison us in all areas of our life. If you want to get past somebody's offense and hurt on you, you have to get to a place where you want to stop meditating on their sin. This is one of the ways that you can learn how to forgive anyone.